Up tonight on The Rundown, SUNY Oswego, as well as the rest of the country, are remembering television icon and faculty member here at this school, Professor Garrick Utley. Also, we'll be taking a look at the Democratic and Republican primaries that are going to be coming up in a week. And over in the Ukraine, protests have erupted. How will this affect the United States? Stay tuned. Good evening and welcome to The Rundown. I'm Megan Roberts. Coming up tonight, the Mexican drug war has been violent and horrifying, especially for anyone who lives in the areas being affected. Step by step, city by city, the Mexican government is starting to gain control over drug warlords. WT reporter Anthony Hill was in Mexico last fall and spoke with the mayor of Cuernavaca about the security in the region and how this is affecting U.S. borders.
Cuernavaca, Mexico, known as the City of Eternal Spring. It's a popular tourist destination and a popular place to come and learn Spanish. But on December 16th, 2009, it was anything but that, because on that very day, the war on drugs happened right here.
When I hear that happen, that makes me feel like everything's gonna change.
Norma Lescano was working at the State University of New York at Brockport when she heard about the news.
And I was just see the news and the television. I couldn't believe that happened, and I recognized the street and recognized everything, and they was talking about Cuernavaca.
Arturo Beltran Lleva, known as El Jefe de Jefes, and one of Mexico's most notorious drug lords, was shot and killed in his luxury apartment by the Mexican Navy. Look at this video from Mexican television showing the standoff between his forces and some 200 Mexican Marines.
And this is very close to my house, actually. So I was really scared in the beginning because I didn't know what's exactly happening in there.
So with the uncertainty of the safety of her family, Norma decided to move back to Mexico. But almost 4 years later, how safe is Cuernavaca now, and what tactics are being performed by the government?
But the strategy now has changed.
Mayor of Cuernavaca, Jorge Morales Barud, says attacking the causes of why people want to join the cartels in the first place are essential.
Social and economic inequalities, a lack of opportunities for everyone.
And because of that, improvements need to be made.
To improve the neighborhoods, to improve the public places where the families meet, no? In order to improve the parks, improve schools.
As for Norma, well, she doesn't regret returning to the place she calls home.
Actually, the situation in Cuernavaca was not actually so bad like the news presented. It was everybody was doing everything normal, and we just tried to keep in our life.
And I should also mention that Mayor Barud told me that Cuernavaca is significantly safer than it has been in the past few years, and that it's no more dangerous than the average U.S. city. Reporting from Cuernavaca, Mexico, I'm Anthony Hill.
Well, joining me tonight via Skype is WTOP reporter Anthony Hill. Anthony, good evening. How are you?
Good evening to you, Megan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. First of all, congratulations on an excellent report. It was very, very well done. My first question to you is, how is this affecting the United States? We have, Arizona, states like Arizona and Texas who are right on the border of where a lot of this is occurring. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it definitely has an effect on the United States because obviously you have drugs moving in from Mexico to the United States. And not only does it have an effect on the United States, but really just the citizens of Mexico. I mean, I think we should also talk about how Mexico doesn't get the best rep in the international media. A lot of times when you think about Mexico, it's synonymous with drugs. That's not always the case. I mean, I've been to several places in Mexico and never felt at harm. But the fact of the matter is that you have police forces and the government and then you have a force that is called the drug cartel, and you have lots of them. And so they do have an effect on the border because you have drugs being, brought all the way throughout Mexico, predominantly from Central America and the northern tip of South America, and it's going all the way throughout Mexico and through our border into the United States. And so obviously whenever you have like a black market, like a drug cartel, you have violence because there's no way to regulate it. And so unfortunately, we have the residual effects that come with the black market, and that's of the drug cartel, the doings of the drug cartel.
Anthony, you were in Mexico. Did you see a lot of the effects on the city that you were in? Were a lot of those effects from the drug warlords that were in that region? Could you still see those in the city?
No, that's the funny thing. I lived in a city called Cuernavaca. It's known internationally as the city of eternal spring because it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's perfect. I mean, vegetation, it's one of the most beautiful cities you'd ever go to. And Cuernavaca has always been known as a pretty safe city, even at the height of, I guess you can say, the war on drugs that Mexico has been fighting. But when this drug cartel leader, Lord, if you will, was shot in Mexico, I mean, it kind of went against common wisdom that Cuernavaca was separated from Mexico and that they didn't have any effects of the drug cartel, or the drug cartels had no effect in Cuernavaca. But I can't say that I've seen, like I said before, I've always felt safe in Cuernavaca and many other places. I traveled throughout Mexico. I've never felt endangered, but I mean, it's still happening though. They still have a residual effect.
And speaking of the fact of how safe you felt, there have been many tourists who have decided not to take trips and vacations to Mexico because of the problem with the war on drugs and for fear of being brought into that. Do you think that tourists in the United States should have any fear of going down to Mexico? I know for myself, I've traveled down there and I always felt very safe as well. Yeah. However, there would be nights on the beach, there would be, soldiers walking around with machine guns, and it was just, something that doesn't seem familiar to you. However, it does kind of give you a sense of feeling safe, and you just said yourself you felt safe. So, but do you think that tourists should be at all concerned when they travel down to Mexico?
I would say that you should be concerned anywhere you go. Should you have a heightened sense of concern as a tourist going to Mexico? I'd say it depends. I think one of the mistakes we make, especially in the media, is that we generalize and overgeneralize Mexico. Some places in Mexico I wouldn't go to, but I mean, the grand majority of Mexico is extremely safe. And so if you're a tourist and you're watching and you want to go to Mexico, go to Mexico. There are a lot of amazing places in Mexico, some of the most beautiful places in the world, and really some of the most safest places in the world. But going back to how we cover Mexico and what place Mexico has in our discourse, we think of it as being so dangerous, and it's because we tend to overgeneralize. But the fact of the matter is that, I mean, people don't think, I don't want to go to the United States because, they have school shootings, or they've had terrorist attacks, and that's, I mean, they're isolated incidences, and I think we have to think about it in the same respect with Mexico. Granted, there are certain cities in Mexico, border towns, again, that are still having safety issues because of drugs being transferred from Mexico to the United States.
Yep.
A lot of places in northern Mexico are not the most... common wisdom is you don't want to go to anywhere in Durango, which is a state in Mexico. No city at all.
Exactly.
But,
and I guess you can
amazing.
say you would find that in any country that you travel to. Anthony, I want to thank you so much for being on the show with me tonight. Thanks for Skyping in with me, and a really great
problem,
report.
Megan.
Thank you very much. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the primary elections coming up. Stay with us. You're watching The Rundown.
SUNY Oswego MBA program, ranked 14th in the United States according to U.S. News and World Report. 5-year MBA programs are available for public accounting, broadcasting, and psychology. MBAs are also available for management, health services administration, and public accounting. Classes available full or part-time on campus, online, or at the Metro Center in downtown Syracuse. More information is available at oswego.edu/MBA or by calling 315-312-2911.
Get your Smokey on. If you see someone in danger of starting a wildfire, step in and make a difference. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Good evening and welcome back. Coming this November, Congress will be facing re-election. All of the House is up and a third of the Senate will face the polls to win back their seats. Both parties are looking to gain seats in this deeply divided political atmosphere. Democrats will be focusing on gaining seats in the Republican-controlled House, while Republicans look to make some gains in the Senate. Next week, many GOP candidates will go through the primaries, and this could be a crucial deciding factor of whether or not the GOP will be able to gain seats in the Senate. The interesting part of all of this is the fact that the GOP's competition isn't coming from the opposing party, but is between Republicans and the Tea Party. Joining me now to discuss this is WTOP reporter and political analyst Kevin Carr. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure, Megan. Thank you.
First of all, let's talk about the Republican Party and how it's been seeing this divide since 2010 between Republicans and the Tea Party. And when you're seeing the fact that essentially the same party, when you look at it technically, is running against each other, what does that say to you about a united front being put on by the Republican Party?
Well, what it says to me is that it could be somewhat difficult for a fully united front to be put on. We know that the government shutdown, regardless of what you personally thought was responsible, or who I should say, many people did seem to think that the Republicans were at fault for that. And we do know that a lot of Republican leaders aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye completely with many Tea Party candidates. And while the Tea Party is still technically a sect, if you will, a section of the Republican Party, who knows if even in maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 years it could become its own party, or at least try to. But yeah, I would say it's almost like a civil war in a sense within the Republican Party, and it's happened in other times throughout history, but it certainly is a big factor in determining whether or not they can gain some ground in this upcoming midterm elections.
When we take a look at November 2014 midterm elections, Democrats are going for the House. The entire House is up for re-election. Republicans are looking to gain control in the Senate. Now only a third of the Senate is up for re-election. That's a lot less seats, you know. Do you think that's going to play a factor into whether or not they're able to gain ground in the Senate?
Yes, I think it will play a factor. And the two key things, one for each side, I suppose I should say, the shutdown really tarnished the Republicans' reputation among Americans, and Obamacare has tarnished the reputation of Democrats to many people as well. And I think that depending on what happens with the president's administration, if there are any key policies he implements throughout the year up through November, if Obamacare starts to run smoothly, more efficiently perhaps, and if the unemployment rather, if that starts to decrease perhaps as well, that could be definitely something that influences outcomes of these elections.
Absolutely, a lot of factors that are going to be, that the American people will be looking at going into Election Day. President Obama just about a month ago gave his State of the Union address and gave his agenda to Congress of what he would like to accomplish this year. Given that it is a re-election season, do you think that they'll be able to accomplish anything in Congress coming up?
I think that Democrats will probably still be able to gain a good chunk of the ground. However, I was scanning through some political commentaries and opinions across the internet, television, and some analysts said that if Republicans were to have all their elections right now, there's a good chance that they would win. Just again, Obamacare has been kind of a rough spot for the Democrat base, and it depends on whether Obama's approval rating can start to go a little bit higher, or at least not falter too much low, because let's face it, whether or not you agree with the president or not in his policies and thinking, his values, ideologies, his approval rating hasn't been very good.
Yep. Well, we will definitely be keeping an eye on this, and as the primary elections go on, we will give you an update of who is winning in what area. We're going to take a quick break, and after the break, Kevin will join me again to talk about protests that are happening in the Ukraine. Stay with us. You're watching The Rundown.
Hey, pal, you want to pay attention to the road?
Relax, man, I got it.
Look, my man, if your bad driving gets me killed, you better hope you die too, or I will haunt you silly. And I'm not just gonna float over your bed like, woo! I'm gonna be making a more annoying noise, like, ah! And instead of wearing those long white robes, I think I'll wear something more form-fitting and upsetting. The other ghosts will look and be like, wow, we've never seen that before.
So, are you going out tonight? I can't. My parents say I have to be home right after work. That's so gay. Totally gay.
Ugh, that is so Emma and Julia.
Why are you saying that's so Emma and Julia?
Well, you know, when something is dumb or stupid, you say that's so Emma and Julia.
Who says that?
Everyone.
Imagine if who you are were used as an insult. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
SUNY Oswego MBA program, ranked 14th in the United States according to U.S. News and World Report. 5-year MBA programs are available for public accounting, broadcasting, and psychology. MBAs are also available for management, health services, administration, and public accounting. Classes available full or part-time on campus, online, or at the Metro Center in downtown Syracuse. More information is available at oswego.edu/MBA or by calling 315-312-2911.
Hi, we're Real Big Fish. And you're watching WTOP 10. Like the number.
Good evening and welcome back. The Olympics in Russia have come to a close. However, the world's attention will stay on that area of the world, focusing on the protests in the Ukraine. President Putin has been addressing the situation, and now President Obama is taking a stand. President Obama called Russia's president on Friday to enlist his support for the Ukraine agreement. Jim Scioto reports.
Today, President Obama called arguably the most powerful man in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin. The White House has waved off talk of a Cold War chess game playing out in the violence and bloodshed on the streets of Kiev.
The president is correct when he says that this is not about the United States and Russia or the West and Russia. This is about Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
But critics say that denies an obvious tug of war in Ukraine between East and West, the opposition leaning towards Europe, the government towards Russia.
The president doesn't think it's a chess game. Certainly Vladimir Putin does. Vladimir Putin wants a restoration of the Russian Empire, of which Ukraine is the crown jewel. And I'm very worried about what actions after the Olympics that Putin may take in order to ensure that.
But how much influence does the U.S. really have? To encourage a political solution, the U.S. banned visas for 20 senior members of the Ukrainian government and is considering freezing their assets overseas. But steps beyond that are limited.
You can have a much wider, not only visa ban and economic sanctions, but really not being willing to meet with the Ukrainian leadership in any conferences, sort of shunning them. The problem with that, and this is what the Europeans say, is, well, that just drives them closer toward Russia anyway.
Joining me once again tonight is WTOP reporter and political analyst Kevin Carr. Kevin, let's just start off with we've seen arguably the two most powerful leaders in the world, President Putin and President Obama, work together to come to a solution in Syria. Do you think we'll see the same type of thing happen with the Ukraine?
Hard to say for sure at this point, but we know that their relationship is a bit more on the tense side. But I do think some sort of agreement that won't be too edgy, too tense in the end will be reached, but certainly the fate of Ukraine itself is up in the air as of right now.
Yes, and as we've heard, President Obama is not looking to reignite any Cold War tensions. He's not looking at this as a West versus East type of thing, but do you think President Vladimir Putin is looking at it like that?
I wouldn't be surprised if some of those thoughts were perhaps infiltrating his mind, just because of the decades of history we've had with Russia, who used to be the Soviet Union, of course. But I don't think that's a huge part of that. I just think that Ukraine also helps define part of Russia's identity themselves. They've always had somewhat of an allegiance, a tie together since Russia was even in the Soviet Union. So I think it's mainly about them in Ukraine more than it is about them in the U.S.
The Ukraine government supports Russia. The Ukraine people are trying to get some Western ideology involved in the Ukraine and break away a little bit from Russia. So is it a good thing to have President Obama in their corner? Is that a person that they're going to want in their corner?
Potentially. That's definitely a big factor in why the protests began, which were, of course, much more peaceful than they have been recently. The European Union reached out to Ukraine, but they favored a stronger tie with Russia and Putin, which angered many of the people. Of course, other measures that were passed through, such as anti-protest laws and then just police brutality and how they've been treating the protesters, has escalated the violence as well. But yeah, that's about what I see with the situation so far for the most part.
And of course, we are going to continue to look into this situation as it progresses. Kevin, thank you very much for joining me on The Rundown tonight. As always, I appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Rundown.
There's a lot of talk out on the street about his mother. His mother. Your mother. Their mother. But in the end, is anyone really even thinking about them?
The SUNY Oswego MBA program, ranked 14th in the United States according to U.S. News and World Report. 5-year MBA programs are available for public accounting, broadcasting, and psychology. MBAs are also available for management, health services administration, and public accounting. Classes available full or part-time on campus, online, or at the Metro Center in downtown Syracuse. More information is available at oswego.edu/MBA or by calling 315-312-2911.
SAVAC ambulance responded to a 1 Bravo response, basement of Cuba Hall.
Dispatch, SAVAC 1, en route.
Hey, we're at SAVAC. How can we help you today?
Good evening. This Friday marked a tragic day for the world of broadcast journalism, which hit home for us here at SUNY Oswego. Television news icon Garrick Utley died of cancer at age 74. Around the country, he was known as the host of Meet the Press, anchor of the weekend edition of NBC Nightly News, and the recipient of the Overseas Press Club's Edward R. Murrow Award and the George Foster Peabody Award. However, to us, he was simply known as Professor Utley. I am joined here tonight by Adam Rubsick and once again via Skype, Pat Malowski, who along with myself were fortunate enough to be students of Professor Garrick Utley and were able to learn the extraordinary lessons he has left behind. Guys, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
So I'm going to start with you, Adam. You were a student in his class. You got to sit through all the presentations he gave us. What were your reactions to him?
Well, it's such a rich class. Someone with credentials and a resume like he brings into a class of upperclassmen broadcasting students, as we were, it was really the right place at the right time. I mean, he just had everything he said was good to say and a great voice to go along with it too.
And Pat, over to you. You were his TA. You were able to work with him on a one-on-one relationship. What did you think of him when you got to sit with him in person and be with him?
one of the most humble people I think I've ever met. You know, someone who's done so much in their life. He really treated everyone like an equal human being. I remember the first time I met him was when I personally walked into his class, and just like, you know, any other class, you expect to go sit down and, you know, wait for the class to start. But he stood up, and if you guys remember, he was 6'6", so he was pretty tall. And he walks over to me and goes, "Hi, I'm Garrett Gottlieb, nice to meet you," and shook my hand. You know, I've never really had a professor do that like that. And he was just such a humble person and treated every human being with the same amount of respect he wanted to be treated with.
You know, and oh my gosh, when he would walk in, he was 6'6", and he's just this really big guy, and you know what a news icon he is, so you're just automatically so impressed. And I don't know if for you, Adam, but I just automatically had such a level of respect for him. And just as a person, to be able to take time out of his life. I mean, he's retired. He could just be, you know, laying on a beach somewhere, but no, he wanted to come and teach the students of Oswego how to be better journalists and what to expect when they got out into the world. So what did that say to you about him?
Yeah, his passion was definitely there for, we all saw that, like you said, on the first day when he met with our class, and the resume he had really kind of, the respect was automatic, and a different kind of style of teaching. It was more of a discussion form, and really he let us get involved, and there was so much of his past that related to where this broadcast is going, and it was a perfect audience with a perfect teacher, and with that, it just, everything he said was, you really took it in as because he's been there. He's been in the professional world. He knows how to get it done, and so it was the best advice you could really get.
Yeah, and Pat, for you, just sitting in his class with him when you first took the class before you were a TA, so when you were sitting in that class, what messages stood out to you, and what did you take away as, you know, you're now going into graduation, you're going to be looking for jobs. What do you take away from that class?
What I took away from that class was you just need to know how to do everything and be ready for change with everything. But I really think it wasn't just, you know, Professor Utley was a great teacher, he was a great broadcaster, and he was a great human being, and he taught you a lot of things just about life in general, especially someone who had so much life experience. He reported in over 75 different countries in his tenure as a reporter. He taught different students, he met different people, interviewed anyone you could think of. So really, he was like a walking encyclopedia of anything you'd want to know, and he knew a little bit about everything. And he kind of just watching him, kind of just listening to him talk, kind of taught you to just kind of make sure you're prepared for everything, and kind of a role model to kind of look up to like that.
Oh, an
really,
absolute role model.
I would say I'll never have another professor who was like him.
No.
You're never going to have that.
We never will. We'll never have another professor like him. I personally think it was the most important class that I've ever taken. One of the messages he left us was right on our last class, and it was about all the noise that's around you in life. And it was while he was in Vietnam, and there was a lot of shooting going on, and he was very, very scared. And the commander walks up to him and says, "It's not the noise that's going to hurt you, it's the bullets." So he said there's going to be a lot of noise around you in life, but it's the bullets you have to look out for. And that stood out to me the most of what I'll remember from him and what you can take through life.
And he was such a good communicator with all the guests he brought in, some big-time guests talking to us, broadcasting class at SUNY Oswego. There was some big names in there, and the way he just communicated with people was outstanding.
I have to leave it there. That's going to do it for us here tonight. On behalf of The Rundown, have a good night.